Hello friends, here at Bangor City Cemetery, and I've been working on documenting this cemetery on Find a Grave for 2.5 months, since early May of this year. And I'm going to try to keep the video as brief as possible, but I want to do a quick tour of it because it really is a historic old cemetery. Mount Hope is across the road here, and Mount Hope is the biggest cemetery in Bangor. Bangor City Cemetery often gets lumped in with Mount Hope, but it actually predates it by a few years. And this is the oldest burial section in Bangor. So I'll show you some highlights. It starts off across from the maintenance shed, and there's this little hill. I wasn't sure what this building was, so I reached out to the sexton of the cemetery, who informed me that in the wintertime, when they couldn't break the ground back then, they would actually store bodies in here. It's a giant mausoleum. You can see the sort of dirt roof probably over the concrete, and they used this mausoleum right up until the early 1900s. Now funeral homes take care of the body and preserve it, and they can actually burn the ground in the wintertime for winter burials now. But so the mausoleum's sort of obsolete, hasn't been used in over 100 years, but I thought that was pretty cool. And it starts off the cemetery. You can actually see graves on the top on the left, so they utilize every inch of space they could. And I'll walk around the side here. Very Gothic kind of atmosphere. It's covered with that ivy. And there we have the door. It looks like something from a medieval palace. Of course, it's padlocked, but I would love to see inside of that someday. And we'll walk around the side here, right up that hill where I just finished up. I'm gonna walk up that hill and just kind of show you what it looks like. Very majestic looking building. It's massive. You have a chimney on the top. And you can kind of see the little burial plot here. All of these burials from the 1800s, save the one right there with the flag in front of it. That is a Civil War veteran. And then walking further back, there's the roof. Walk farther back, takes us right to Babies Row and Strangers Row. Now I think on the other side of the street, because I still have to do the new section of this cemetery, but this is the old section. I think across the street, there's another Babies Row and Strangers Row, which I'll get to probably weeks from now, but this is the older one anyway. And then when we walk down this hill, you might recognize some of these graves from prior videos. This is a mix of the early 20th century and the early 19th century. So doubtless some of these were moved here from other cemeteries. As the city expanded and the population expanded, they actually would reinter a lot of the bodies to Mount Hope and surrounding areas, bigger cemeteries. So some of these probably aren't original burials, but still, this is now their final resting place. And we can see across the front of the cemetery there. So I'll walk up this hill. The video would be way too long to walk down every row, but I'll try to show you some highlights. And again, as we go, you'll probably recognize some of these graves from earlier videos I've done, but this is kind of just a recap before I move on to the new section soon. Very hilly terrain, very good exercise, a lot of uphill steps. Love these old steps here. A lot of family graves on the top here. You can see the old family plots. I have reviewed some of those in earlier videos. See several in here of the sort of iron bars, and you can walk in on the side. There's many now unmarked graves through here too. So I'm being careful where I step, try not to walk where there might be burials. And sometimes, as I've talked about, you can only sort of make out a few footstones here and there, and that's literally all that's left of the person's burial is a footstone. So I created entries, even if all I had was a footstone, and tried to mark their approximate location, just so maybe someday somebody looking for their long lost relative might be able to put two and two together. For ancestral research, a little bit of information beats no information. You can see these old sort of almost look like church spire type graves. People back then were of course very religious and firmly believed in God and the afterlife. A lot of these obelisks will last forever. They've already lasted 200 years, some of them, and you know, they're built to last, unlike some of the smaller graves, which, you know, probably were never really meant to last for centuries, or they never thought they would. They made them so the family could mourn in their lifetime. But I bet a lot of these stonemasons would have been fascinated to know that somebody is trying to make out what they had etched on the graves in the year 2025. Such a historic old cemetery. This is literally, you can see the ages taking place from the birth of the city when it was just a small settlement to one of the bigger cities in Maine. And this is an interesting dichotomy of the ages. Looks like this grave's from 1838. Susan, wife of Caleb Holmes. And then just a few feet to her right, we have some burials from the late 1800s. This one's actually 1918, George Abbott. So, grave from 1918, or 1913 rather. 5 feet away is a grave from 1838. Pretty amazing stuff. And I'm walking sort of across, again, not looking to make a long video, but definitely wanted to show you folks what Bangor City Cemetery looked like in all of her glory. Young Melissa Titus, did a whole video on her. We can see we've only come about halfway through the old section. I started out way down there, and I'm about halfway through. You can see it's very massive. On Find a Grave, again, I still have the whole new section to do, but it's still only 51% photographed, the entire cemetery. So that just kind of tells you how many are still unmarked and always will be, unless a family member pays for a plot. I have seen a few stones that were originally unmarked, and then they have a modern stone. So it could happen still, you never know. Here's another fenced in family plot. What's left of it anyway. You can see a lot of the bars are now gone, but two sides are there, two sides are not there. There's the old style stone from the 1850s. Mary E., wife of Hiram Smiley. Right there is another Mary, wife of Hiram Smiley. So he had at least two wives, both named Mary. You can see sort of the etching of the Bible on Mary E.'s stone. And if I recall, one of her sons was also buried there. Yeah, I believe that's their son, and that's the other Mary. That one's almost turned into dust, but it's there. I was able to see just enough to make an entry on Find a Grave. Another little family plot. Here's another one I struggled for a long time to be able to read, but it's George H. Osgood, who died 1844. A lot of young babies died in 1844. It probably was around the time of cholera and maybe smallpox and consumption, which was the term back then that they used for wasting of the lungs. This is a sparse section. There's probably dozens of burials here in this section, but you only see a few headstones here and there. It's because most of them are now dust or unmarked in the first place, but very old section. This dates till about the mid 1800s as well. Took me a little while to be able to read the inscriptions on some of these because it is so old, but well worth it to me, documenting history. Several of these are in prior videos as well. A couple children's graves, both from 1844 right there. They got a little bit better about having things stand out on headstones in the 1900s. So as you can see, William H. Dow, 1861 to it looks like 1900, if I'm reading that correctly. A few letters are coming off. Very hilly terrain, lots of squirrels and groundhogs through here too. You can see a lot of their holes have been dug. I started this last year, but I hadn't gotten very far before winter set in, so I decided to catalog it starting in that far corner by the road. Even if I was duplicating some steps, that's okay. I wanted to get it right. So been kind of stopping here 2 or 3 nights a week after work with the hour or so of daylight I have to document what I can. And as I walk through, I am hit by deja vu because I remember the first time I came across some of these. Many of them were never on Find a Grave or any other records. So super glad to be able to record some of these. Here's one from 1914, so 111 years ago. That's fallen over. Still very resilient material. A lot of Civil War veterans. That's the telltale shape of the Grand Army of the Republic. Army issued headstone. Right there you can see the actual Grand Army Republic monument that they placed. Lucy G. Powers, 1824 to 1914. So she would have been about 90 years old. Very cool stuff. Here is a family plot, the Pattersons. And then I almost missed this one. It was almost underground. But it's a child's grave. Elvira S. As I was cataloging this cemetery, I just did row by row, step by step. So you have these little rows in between, and I would stop there so I knew exactly where I was leaving off, and I just walked it step by step. Of course, starting in May, we were fresh off the winter, and a lot of this grass was long then, so it made it extra difficult, but now it's mowed. It looks like the city comes along once every couple of weeks and mows it, which of course, once it was mowed, made it a lot easier to catalog it. You can kind of see some of the mowed grass thrown on the graves, which in a way, you know, probably protects it from the elements. It's a lot easier to read the early 20th century dates, and by that time they'd started putting both the date of birth and the date of death, which makes it a heck of a lot easier to catalog, a lot less work. For example, on Find a Grave and Family Search and Ancestry, if the date of birth and date of death are already in there, it saves a lot of time, it's more efficient, and you can tell these ones are a lot thicker than the old style graves, and the elements obviously haven't set in quite as bad as the ones from the early 1800s and late 1700s, or even before. Occasionally you see the ones that still have the original white, and sometimes they've gotten darker with age. We've seen family plots with the individual footstones, and sometimes they just had the one big stone and everybody buried there is listed, like on this one. You'd have the family name on the front, Withy, and then when we walk around, their names. So you have Simeon Jr., his wife Flora, and then their children, Ansel W., Simeon S., and Lorestini. So, very cool way to memorialize these folks. And really, if you look, the patriarch of the family, Simeon, he passed away 98 years ago. And just about done here. Right back where I started. At the very beginning, right on the corner of the avenue here. This would have been the first grave I looked at when I started cataloging this cemetery back in May. Alice A., wife of John K. Pierce. March 24, 1876 to December 8, 1911. And then I just worked my way back to the next road, and then just kept going that way, and finally I finished up this cemetery 2 days ago. So right there is going to be the next project. The newer section of Bangor City Cemetery goes to that tree line over there. So I suspect that one's going to be a little bit easier, because then we're getting into the late 1800s and then into the 20th century. So there won't be as much fungal growth on the stones. They'll probably have more dates of birth on them, and they'll just be overall more visible and probably less unmarked. So it might be a little bit easier. I don't want to jinx myself and say that now, but just to give you a rough idea before I close out the video, I'll show you. We'll walk down to the Mount Hope part of the cemetery just to show you how big this really is. You can't even really see my original starting spot over the hills. Here is sort of a gully. It's a wider road for the lawn mowers and everything to go through. And then you have barrels again on your left, a wider road, and then the burial ground resumes on the right. So And then you can see the road that separates Bangor City Cemetery from Mount Hope. So eventually I'll get to Mount Hope, but next I have the new section. So hope you enjoyed.